Hello and welcome back. It's Tall Toast here. Today I'm going to recap the heist comedy Logan Lucky, Settle In, and subtitles on. In the opening scene, Jimmy is working a construction job underneath the Charlotte Motor Speedway. His boss calls him into the office where he's told the bad news. Today will be his last day. It's because he lied about his leg trauma and didn't put the injury on his application. Someone from corporate has found out and deemed him too much of an insurance liability to be on the worksite. With the bad news, Jimmy gets up and leaves. The Logan family curse strikes again. Upset, he stops by his sister's place on the way back home. He tells her he got off work early and will be able to take his daughter Sadie to her rehearsal practice. Amy sarcastically calls him sweet, but says Sadie's practice was yesterday and he already missed it. She also adds that his ex-wife is furious. Jimmy heads over there to apologize. Upon arriving, Bobby Joe blows up and says that Amy got pulled over by the cops for speeding while Sadie was in the car. As Jimmy deflects and asks about the for sale sign on the outside of the house, Sadie comes down the stairs and gives him a hug. She asks if he wants to come along with them to the movies, but he lies and says that he has to get back to work. Getting ready to leave, Bobby Joe reveals they are moving across state lines to Lynchburg. She doesn't want him to be in Sadie's life anymore. Jimmy tells her to expect a legal fight, but she laughs at him and asks where he'll find the money for a lawyer. Later in the evening, we see him heading to the bar. The scene cuts to him talking to the bartender, Clyde, who's his brother. Clyde talks about their great-aunt Maggie, who won the lottery but lost the winning ticket, their father, who choked to death on a pancake, and how both of them got hit by roadside bombs on the same day while serving in Iraq. The Logan family curse is real, he swears. It's the reason for all of their bad luck. Jimmy, unable to stand getting into the topic once again, gets up to go to the bathroom. Some drunk customers then stumble into the bar and begin making fun of Clyde's war injury, asking him if he can handle making them a drink. He takes off his prosthetic and makes their order with ease. When Jimmy gets back, he gets angry as they continue. Rather than stop, they start to make fun of his limp. Recognizing one of the guys as a wannabe influencer, Jimmy asks for a picture and then slams his head into the bar, sparking a full-on bar brawl. Clyde calmly walks out to the parking lot and proceeds to light their cars on fire. Jimmy, seeing the carnage unfold, mysteriously says the words, "orange cauliflower," and walks off. The story shifts to the next day, where the brothers are sitting at home. Orange cauliflower is the secret code word they use when they want to carry out illegal crimes. Clyde says he's not interested this time, but gets convinced to at least listen to the plan. The target is the Charlotte Motor Speedway. Jimmy says that because of the ongoing sinkholes underneath the ground, and having worked there previously, he has the tactical knowledge they need to pull it off. Clyde asks why he's so confident, and Jimmy smiles, saying he knows how they move the money. In the middle of an emergency a couple of months ago, Jimmy became aware of the internal tube system they used to move the money from all over the stadium into the vault. With that, the scene shifts over to Sweet Joe Bang, a prison inmate who's known for blowing open vaults, picking up ladies, and cracking safes. The brothers nervously meet with him, but he tells them that his robber days are over, and he's got a small nest egg waiting for him when he gets out in 5 months' time. The Logans ask if he knows of a small oak tree near Dunking Avenue. His nest egg, it turns out, has already been stolen, with people learning where he had stashed it. He becomes interested, but there's still the problem of his current state of incarceration. There's no chance he can help pull off the job in 5 weeks' time. Clyde and Jimmy tell him not to worry because they've already figured out a plan. The plan is then put into motion, and it begins with Clyde intentionally driving into a gas station. Fear not, the man hasn't lost his mind. On the contrary, he needs to land himself in prison on a minor charge. Later, we see him getting handcuffed after being sentenced to 90 days. Following that, Jimmy heads back to his old job to pick up some things. As he's leaving, he learns they're ahead of schedule, and they'll be finishing up sooner than he expected. Amy asks if they should still go through with it, but Jimmy is resolved and says that nothing has changed. Next, Sweet Joe Bang's cousins, who have been brought into the plan, make their way under the tunnel to the worksite. They sabotage the tube system by putting cockroaches in them. The next day, employees walk into the vault and the cockroaches are everywhere. Exterminators are brought in, among them the cousins in disguise. Following that, it moves to the day of the heist. Meanwhile, over in prison, Sweet Joe Bang starts choking after eating his gruel sandwich. He's moved to the prison infirmary and treated with an IV. Later, he asks the nurse if he can get up to visit the bathroom. Him and Clyde then begin to make their escape. They place a box on the underside of a prison truck. And inside the prison, the other inmates begin to create chaos, pretending to fight and then attacking the guards. The warden declares a code red and issues a lockdown. Clyde and Joe Bang are then seen escaping from under the trucks as it stops to get gas. They're picked up by Amy, who drives off in a blue GT350. Joe likes what he sees, so tries to impress her when he gets changed in the back. Back over at the racetrack, Jimmy slips through the service entrance. The tubes are then shown with a huge stack of money already built up for the day. Amy finally arrives at the stadium and drops off Joe and Clyde. Simultaneously in prison, the inmates have a list of demands for the warden after capturing some of the guards. The national anthem is sung at the stadium, with the action soon about to unfold. The cars then start to race, and Clyde and Joe Bang move down the garbage system to get under the track. Jimmy is already waiting for them at the worksite. Joe collects his supplies and starts to prepare an improvised explosive. He's on edge, but places the explosive into the tube and then hides for cover. The tube gets stuck for a moment and then boom, it blows up. However, smoke starts to flow out and the concession workers notice, so they call security. 2 security workers go to investigate. As this is happening, Jimmy and the crew connect a giant vacuum pump and begin to suck up all of the cash and move them into black bags. Joe Bang adjusts the direction of the vacuum, and then Clyde's arm is suddenly sucked into the machine. Jimmy begins to crack and starts to think the Logan family curse is real. He gets into an argument with the cousins, and Joe has to break them up from fighting. Jimmy then promises Clyde that he won't let the curse break them, and he'll get his arm back. Later, we see the cousins driving off with a small part of the money. However, they run into the 2 security guards who question them, but ultimately allow them to pass through. Clyde and Sweet Joe Bang also leave, getting back in the car with Amy, who's waiting for them. Meanwhile, the inmates then begin to escalate the situation even further by creating a fire. The warden is forced to call the fire department, who then mobilize and shortly after enter the prison. As they unload, Jimmy and Joe also get out, dressed in disguise. Eventually, the nurse returns to check on Joe and finds him back in bed. In the next scene, Jimmy makes it in time to catch Sadie's performance at the talent show. He is overcome with emotion at the thought of losing her from his life. He gets back to his home and is ready to check off the final part of his plan. Number 10, hang up and know when to walk away. Sometime later, Amy is working and listening to the news on the radio. The reporter says that the money from the heist has been recovered after an anonymous caller gave a tip about the location of the money. 2 agents from the FBI are also seen visiting the scene of the vault. They debrief Jimmy's old boss and ask for records of all employees who worked at the worksite. A couple of weeks later, Clyde is finally released from prison. Later, at Amy's house, they try to figure out why Jimmy returned the money. Meanwhile, the FBI agents zero in on Jimmy asking about when he visited Joe Bang in prison. They try to speculate about why Clyde would intentionally land himself in prison and also ask about the fire that took place on the night of the heist. Warden Burns says, however, it's impossible for any inmate to escape his prison. He later goes to question Joe, who refuses to give any information away. The FBI continue to investigate, but there's no evidence that ties the Logans to the crime, and Jimmy has an alibi after being seen at Sadie's talent show. Sweet Joe Bang is finally released from prison and goes to visit Clyde at the bar. Clyde reveals he's not on speaking terms with Jimmy after he had returned 90% of the money. No one has seen or heard from him, not even Sadie, his daughter. 6 months have passed since the heist, and the CEO of the racetrack wants to move on from the incident. The FBI, however, aren't ready to put it behind them. In fact, they mention that their forensic accountants are unable to determine the exact amount of cash that was stolen that day. What's more, she knows that the insurance has been paid out as well. The CEO becomes evasive and asks for them to leave. Following that, Joe Bang gets a knock on the door with a shovel that has been left for him outside. Putting 2 and 2 together, he starts to dig at the spot where his nest egg was supposed to be. He finds the black bags with his share of the money. We then flash back to the day of the heist. Jimmy and Amy gathered up the money, retrieved Clyde's arm, and then put them all into the garbage. Jimmy also wiped down the surfaces to make sure no prints were left. Sometime later in the landfill, the black bags with red zip ties are seen with Jimmy and Clyde watching on. Various people involved with the heist are then given money for their part, such as the prisoner in the uprising. Finally, we see Jimmy back at the bar. Sweet Joe Bang is also there on a date with Amy. He asks her what she thinks about the Logan family curse, but she says she doesn't believe in it. The movie ends with Clyde flirting and taking a shot with a woman at the bar, but it's not some random person. It's the FBI agent who is investigating the crime.